Welcome, everyone. This is another edition of Commercial Excellence Month from Vendavo. We'll be giving folks just a few moments to join us as they move over from the waiting room to the main session. But while we're waiting, I do have a question that I want to ask you. McKinsey's done a lot of research very recently to survey senior business leaders. That was just in September. And they asked them what major changes they expect to make internally as a result of the COVID-19 disruptions. Now, three major changes obviously are going to be around people, process, and technology. Those are core to what we're going to be talking about today. But how would you rank things outside of that? And yeah, here's the poll. Thanks for that. So we're things outside of people, process, and technology. Of course, we're looking at corporate purpose. Maybe core processes would be adjusted. Cultural aspiration changes. Ways in making decision-making differently. Partnership adjustments, portfolio adjustments, ways in leading day-to-day, things changing along those lines, or innovation, trying to do something different. So pick three, think about that a little bit in terms of what you expect, what you think your senior leadership is driving towards in terms of what you've heard. Go ahead and pick those three, and let's go ahead and close that out and see what everybody thinks. So we're getting the results back, and a pretty broad spread there. We're looking at cultural aspiration, interesting. Decision-making, that makes sense. Agility, I think, is going to be a theme there. Partnerships, external views, interesting. And then innovation. Okay, so nice balance there, pretty broad spread. And in just a few minutes, we're going to turn to what the actual poll indicated with some interesting results on that. So we can close out that poll. And let's turn now to our next slide and welcome everyone to Commercial Excellence Month Live. Speaking today, we're going to have, joining me is going to be Justin Bailey, who is our Global VP for Value Consulting. Today's topic is accelerating profitable outcomes through commercial excellence, a topic near and dear to your heart, right, Justin?
Very much so. Spent a lot of time on that.
Very much. And this is going to be a great interactive session with folks, lots of opportunities for people to ask questions. On the next slide is our standard disclaimer. Essentially, what we discussed today is subject to change. Before we get started, I want to help lay the land out for you, establish our vision. If you joined us during our previous Commercial Excellence Month in May, you probably remember this framework, and it's around decision-making and taking action. And in fact, it's about leveraging chaos for improvement. Now, this is important for our community, the pricers, the sales leaders, the P&L owners that are responsible for sustainable profitability, recognizing all the internal challenges and all the externalities that are having to be navigated to create that optionality around growth and investment in the business. The key to using the framework is to organize perspectives by looking at what is happening and what needs to be done today, tomorrow, and in the future. So that first phase, disruption, I think we all have experiences that fit into that. We could tell stories about that. But the next pace is when it slows a little bit and you're in the new normal or the next normal, as McKinsey and a lot of others are referring to it. But the difficult part is that you need to look for the inflection point for you, for your market, and use that momentum to continue changing, to transform your capabilities so that you and your team can thrive now and in the future, to be ready for that next disruption. The opportunity to make lasting improvements in your commercial capabilities, because there's always something coming, and that's why we're all working on commercial excellence. So let's turn to that McKinsey slide. You remember that poll that we were looking at just a minute at the beginning? The need for speed is what they ranked as how to quickly achieve actions. That was number one. But the next three major changes were around people, process, and technology. I think I kind of gave that away in my setup at the beginning of the discussion. But critically, it's all around robustness and resiliency, and that those are essential for times of disruption. Essentially, how do we build strength in commercial processes? And that's what we draw on when times get tough. And speaking of times getting tough and capabilities, on our next slide, we're going to be looking at capabilities that Vendavo has designed and we deliver to help you and your organization advance your ability to deliver the value inherent in your business model. So the foundation is pricing. It's the ability to set and optimize list prices and structures, monitor and leverage market information, dynamically adjust pricing, and manage any rebates or incentive programs you might have. And this is delivered by Vendavo Price Point, where the typical user would be the pricing team and perhaps even the product management folks. The second area of capability is around sales, shown at the top. You might need to be able to select and configure the right product at the right price at the right time, and maybe even set up a contract to manage that over time, and then renew that business to grow sales. And you need that through a simple omni-channel experience, whether it's sold directly or through a distributor, or yes, including and especially your direct sales channels. So finally, the interaction there is timed through commercial excellence and the intelligence that's brought forth in deal price guidance, deal intelligence, and commercial analytics, tying together your CRM and your ERP system to really enable that capability. All right. Our keynote session today is accelerating profitable outcomes. This is October 21st. That means it's week 3 and session 10. Let's take a look at our agenda. It's pretty straightforward. First, we're going to be talking about what are the tangible benefits, then what are the hurdles, the barriers that we face. We're going to talk about how we actually do this together. And finally, we have a real world case study to review and discuss. And of course, we invite your discussions as we roll through this, and we'll wrap that up with live Q&A at the end. And with that, let's turn to our first topic. Justin, you got some great numbers that you're going to put up here. And I want to call out here, when we were talking about this and start advertising this particular session, we were talking about $237 million in benefit. That was just through Q1 and Q2 of 2020. But now you're up just shy of $500 million, and that's effectively reflecting the three quarters of 2020, right?
That's correct, Mitch. Spot on. I mean, I think the real power of when we talk about outcomes and benefits is the fact that when executed well, they continue to grow over time. And that's certainly reflected into the latest numbers I'm putting on the screen here. So I might as well jump in here and continue on then, right? So the guy said our topic today, when Mitch asked me to speak here, it really was peeling back the onion a bit in terms of, how are Vendavo's customers able to achieve the sort of results we see on the screen here, both in aggregate and at individual level. My team today, the consultants within Vendavo and the technologists that we have working for us, this is the sort of thing that we wake up every day extremely passionate about. It's really about, at the end of the day, it's about helping our customers, achieve their value in your respective marketplaces. That is fundamentally what Vendavo is all about, is helping everyone else achieve, maximize their benefits and to their shareholders, et cetera. The commercial excellence platform that Mitch opened up with here, certainly there's a technology angle to that, but really at the end of the day, when we think about those sort of results that we're seeing, almost $500 million of positive results, there really shouldn't be a whole lot of surprises in terms of the client's ability to realize and actualize those results. And it simply comes down to the fact that commercial excellence and is really focused on the front side, the sales side. Yes, it may be enabled with pricing, but it's really, Warren Buffett had this quote that summarizes, which is, when the power of pricing, the most important thing when evaluating business is really that pricing power. Commercial excellence fundamentally affects volume, it affects price, and these are the sort of things that drive significant benefits to organizations. All we're really talking about today is, in aggregate, what are we seeing, as well as some of the specific stories around what allows people to be successful on realizing those benefits. The challenge, though, and I think Mitch set this up pretty well at the beginning, as well as the McKinsey study, is that it's not always, the theory of this is pretty basic, right? The income statement, you're able to hit that 1% improvement on terms of price realization, significant in its impact to the bottom line. Those sort of benefits are easy to talk about, but not always easy to achieve. And in fact, multiple studies have shown this, but at the end of the day, that really isn't a technology problem. Most likely, it tends to be related to the people and processes related to that technology investment, which is very critical to a company like Vendavo, because certainly, we are a technology company, but that's not necessarily where the longest lever arm here is, right? We need to be thinking about beyond just the technological implications for a client, but also how will they use it, how will it affect different processes, so that that potential, that 1 to 3% or wherever we're targeting on an annualized basis, we're able to go after and achieve together. So I'm going to use this framework, and we did introduce this on, I think, some prior calls earlier in the year or even years past. We've been using this for a while here, but when we look at a Vendavo project and what makes them successful, yes, there's a technology aspect to it as well, but there's really 3 critical pillars that when we look at who is really on the right-hand side or accelerating the value capture, what are they doing well? It tends to fall in these 3 buckets. They tend to have a very pragmatic planning and forecasting process. They can articulate specifically where they want to go with the investment to derive that additional value. They have a robust organizational change and adoption program in place, in both from a high level, medium level, and low level within the organization. Really thinking about, where are the potential breakdown points, and proactively going after to address them. And then last but not least, they have the top-down accountability and urgency from the sponsor, who is overseeing these sort of initiatives, right? What I want to talk about today, though, is how these things actually tie together. So I'll actually be talking very, very little about technology here. It's really more around how these things connect together. And fundamentally, I think in terms of a left to right process here, right? When we say I gotta have a pragmatic plan, aligning the organization to that plan is really sort of the key thing where I see a lot of folks who struggle, where that tends to break down. And I'll illustrate that as we go through this conversation here. I'm really getting visibility to who's affected, how we're going to achieve our number. And if that's done well, then certainly as we begin engaging and getting into sort of a value capture phase or more of every sort of day-to-day delivery standpoint, if we've done the homework, if we've done the hard work up front, the results are straightforward at the end of the day. Not that there's a day-to-day challenge. Obviously, 2020 has been a rough year, but one way or the other, we have the infrastructure in place and the expectation set that we will be striving to achieve some of those higher end of those results that we shared on the first slide. So for the rest of this presentation, I'm going to do a bit of a deep dive in terms of what I really mean by that, where I see some of our leading value leaders are able to capitalize, right? How they, what is success when they talk about a plan? What does it really mean? How do we get people there? Who's ultimately accountable in this sort of environment? That's what we're going to spend our time on today. So I should preamble this, though, with an important aspect. People invest in commercial excellence technology for a variety of different reasons. There could be certain strategic goals or industry phenomena that we need to react to. Perhaps there's a burning platform and a prior solution that we need to replace. And that's all well and good. But what I'm here to talk about on the next part here is I'm assuming that this is a strategic pricing relationship, right? And that we have a number that we're trying to go out and achieve. If not, that's cool. There's plenty of reasons to invest in a sort of a technology solution, and or different organizations, view the pricing department in different lights, right? Very lightweight administrative to a true strategic pricing organization. I'm assuming for the purpose of the conversation, we're the latter, right? We really are here as a major component of our company's strategy, and that we have a number that we're trying to get to. So with that, right, let's talk about how you get to that number, right? Just to recap that earlier slide here, and you think about your income statement, there's really only a couple ways that, particularly on the sales side, the pricing side, the commercial excellence side, where we drive values of the front office. And that's either we're finding incremental places to improve price capture, we're looking for incremental areas to increase volume or sales volume, or we're trying to improve mix, right? Improve earnings through the fact that we're selling higher margin products versus lower margin products, the prior year, the previous year, or some combination of these 3 things. That's kind of basic at the end of the day. Where we think about value leaders or within that portfolio of Vendavo customers, the people who have really hit the right-hand side of this and are delivering day in and day out. That plan, that pragmatic planning and forecasting I alluded to, is really about owning that number, right? if I'm responsible for delivering $1 million of price specs or $10 million of price benefit in 2021, have I really embraced what it takes to get that done, and have I been enabled and equipped to be able to achieve it? Now, there's a whole bunch of knock-on effects related to that, related to, listen, let's talk about the specific strategies and action items that we're going to do to get to there. There is sort of the risk-reward balancing that goes into this, because no matter what, and no matter what lever we want to pull, there's always risk within the organization when we make a change. But have we done the most to minimize the risk for a given reward? And then lastly, do we have the mapping laid out in terms of what do we need to actually achieve all these things? The sort of organizations that Vendavo worked with, they are large organizations. It takes a team, it's not individuals. And so have we necessarily embraced and reached out to all the sort of stakeholders that will allow us to be successful? The value leaders, when I think of our portfolio of customers that are really at front end, they've got all these things down there. And specifically when they get down to making it achievable and actionable, they're really thinking about getting decision making and planning it down to specific processes, specific business leaders who may be responsible or need to help us on this journey. And lastly, making sure that if we are planning making changes, or showing examples early and often, right? Get objections on the table as soon as possible so that we can respond and react to them. So just as a very basic walkthrough on this, let's just say that hypothetically we want to get additional 1% next year. All right, fantastic. That's a great idea. That's I think anyone who's comes from particularly a pricing background recognizes that that's a fairly reasonable target. Again, plenty of studies have shown over the years that that's a reasonable goal. That is a reasonable range for to be targeting. Well, when we talk about a plan, though, now you got to get granular, right? 1 to 3% is an idea. Now we got to get down to where are we going to drive those results. I pulled up sort of a example table here, related to this, but 1 to 3%, that's great. But all right, who's not going to be affected by that? All right, perhaps we don't touch multi-year contracts, shipping debits out. But where are we going to get that benefit from? Well, maybe we're going to go a little easier on strategic accounts. Perhaps they may not even be in scope for a lot of clients. But we talked about non-strategic accounts or walk-in sales, right? Those are the areas where when we start thinking about pragmatic planning, we want to articulate early, because now folks aren't reacting to things that they shouldn't be reacting to, right? If we're talking about a specific branch of the business where we're going to drive benefits, that is a much safer conversation with the sales leader than saying, letting them think about, well, listen, we're going to talk about our Walmart-sized customer that we're going to be affecting. But it goes even further than that, right? Because that may get us past sort of the top level sniff test. But what I really do believe that folks who have taken this to the next step have gone down to an even more granular level, right? We're talking about pro forma, detailed level planning, individual customers, individual products that we are thinking about perhaps making a change to. And again, it could be price, it could be volume. I just happen to be showing price on the screen here, whatever that case may be, and getting that out in front of people early, right? Ideally, it all ties together as well. Because the reality is that someone at the end of the day has to enact that decision. And perhaps in some cases, it's very simple. Listen, we're going to push it through an IT system. Fantastic, we're done. But someone has to be signing up for that at the end of the day, or it more likely will fall by the wayside. The critical thing we want to be thinking about here is what is it going to take to actually get us over that line? Because if we can get that individual leader or leaders saying yes and saying, yeah, we're ready to do this. I get that the risk reward has been balanced and my sponsor is supporting me to be successful in here. That's when we're ready to go and actually make that idea of 1 to 3% a reality.
Yeah, the granularity of those numbers and who's going to be impacted, tremendously powerful there.
Yep. Well, I think what it really reflects is the fact that leaders who, the value leaders that we work with, right? Again, like I think that ownership of a number is just super critical, right? That concept of, listen, we're going to go out and get a result here. And that is different than, well, I'm going to informationally provide something to the sales team. It's very easy to get a yes. So like, oh yeah, you could show me additional numbers and then promptly ignore it. Not that that would ever happen, of course, right? But what is actually going to drive a change in behavior, right? And I want to, this, when I talked about plan and why I started with the financial side of it is because the simple matter is that we need to be able to affect the organization here. We need to expect people to perform potentially differently than they have in the past. And that could be a significant risk from their perspective. But if you start with the outcome in mind, which is, listen, how are we going to get these numbers? The reality is that there's not a single CFO I've ever met who would pass up additional earnings at the end of the day, provided there was a reasonable risk reward plan put together, right? So that sort of plan at a high level, and you got to get to a certain level in the organization, someone who's willing to take on that risk reward profile. That's how you get a sponsor. Once you have a sponsor, that creates an environment for change, right? Because now they're willing to support individuals to take that risk, to balance what needs to be happening to capture that additional benefit. And that at the end of the day then leads to the individuals and what sort of training programs or sort of enablement needs to happen with them to make them successful. It really is this flows very naturally if you start from that with sort of the end in mind.
Mm. Makes sense. Yeah, the sponsorship in terms of, you've got the granularity where the sponsors buy into it. Now you've got their buy-in to help drive that change.
But not even, and certainly help drive the change, but also it allows us to take that next step, which is to then do the detailed planning to say, all right, if we are going to get X, Y, and Z done, or if there is a objection that needs to be handled, let's get that aired. Right. The passive resistance is the enemy here, right? You got to let people air their grievances, get it on the table, and address them and or direct them, right? There's a bit of a carrot and a stick here if done well, that comes together with that level of sponsorship.
Exactly.
At and that spins us into really more of the traditional change and adoption sort of topics. And I think really, just to take us back to technology for a second, really at the end of the day, when people think about, training, for example, and they're talking at a technology solution like Vendavo, they think in terms of like functional training. Well, what do I do? What buttons do I hit? That's good. That's and we do plenty of that, right? At the end of the day here, it's important, but it's not sufficient, because you can very easily pave the cow path, as the old saying goes, without necessarily adopting or driving towards the outcomes that we're looking for. And again, I think that the important thing here is that, again, if we can align on where we want to get to, and we've done the sort of risk reward profile, right? We can start asking ourselves, all right, well, what does that mean for all the other stakeholders within the organization? If we get the leaders and sort of the middle management saying yes, what do we need to do otherwise? And recognize that we're asking often individual contributors within the company to take and have potentially conversations they're not comfortable with long-term customers. We may be asking for, even like pricing administrators to be thinking perhaps more strategically about how they actually leverage pricing as a way to achieve an outcome, or we may be putting additional KPIs in place that ultimately they may not be familiar with, but now we're holding them accountable to. And that's a long windup to say that, it varies within the organization, the impact of these sort of initiatives over time and what it means for them. And there's no shortcut for doing the hard work to really have a robust plan around those individual areas and what it means to do these sort of changes with regards to our commercial processes at the end of the day. Yes, some will be very, functional at the end of the day. Here's the button you click. Here's the form you fill out, right? Here's the exception process. But there's also deeper level training and insight that can be provided as well. Do we really have a good understanding of value-based pricing, for example? Do we really understand how to communicate a price change? Particularly, we haven't done one in a long time. Mm-hmm. Mapping that all out with appropriate plans, whether it be sponsorship, yes, traditional training, getting into coaching and mentoring sort of relationships. Those detailed planning that goes into that sort of a change management is critical to this. But again, it stems from the fact that we have a goal in mind and we're driving to achieve it. So kind of the last little piece of this here is, when I think about the value leaders within the Vendavo portfolio who are really at the cutting edge of this, or maybe not from a number standpoint, but from an execution standpoint, they have this top-down led accountability and urgency to go along with it, right? We've seen the vision, we've taken the steps necessary to act on that change, and now we're going to follow up, and not just follow up, but also manage deviations appropriately. Because I had a forecasting job a long time ago. The moment you write that number down, you're wrong, right? Things happen, customers push back, but how do you manage the day-to-day in the organization? Because again, if we're aiming for a particular target and we're running above or below, what do we do to try to get back on track? In particular, when you're talking about a sponsor level oversight, now it's when we got to think about how do you take all that complexity, and let's face it, pricing attracts usually a very analytically minded, detail oriented sort of persona, if I can say it that way. How do we distill all that complexity of what may be happening in the marketplace across thousands and thousands of customers and products up to a level that can be understood and allow decision making? So it's really important to think about proper KPIs that are simple to understand and can result in and can drive results, right? Drive the appropriate corrective behavior if we do get into deviations. For Vendavo, we pretty much have standardized upon really three key metrics that really get us to that benefits tracking sort of aspect, right? We need to know where's the pool of revenue we're talking about, within all that, right? Because of different channels, different assumptions, right? Are we focused on trying to drive value? What's the scope? Are we seeing proper adoption within that scope, right? If I suggest something should be $1 tomorrow and no one ever adheres to that, that isn't doing a whole lot of good from impact standpoint. And then last but not least, are we seeing a lift come through? And again, that could be volume, it could be margin, right? At the end of the day, ways to define that. But we pretty much keep it to those three key KPIs. There are others, right? I've seen plenty of ones work, but the important thing is that they tend to roll up. You tend to be able to drill down. You can get to root cause very quickly within those KPIs. And so just as an example, this is something that is shown through with one of our customers, obfuscated, numbers are randomized, that sort of thing. But the general gist is this sort of table. It's reviewed monthly with the CEO and the regional presidents. And in this fictitious example, right, we happen to be, if I can emphasize that little box in the lower right corner, here we have a region who is coming short of plan, right? We're aiming to make $14 million or $14.7 million. We're only at 14, right? All right, well, how does this work, right? Well, again, because these sort of KPIs are drillable, they are the sort of thing we can, tease apart patterns, right? This one happens to be summarized by how the regional leaders, regional presidents are organized. Scandinavia, Great Britain, Central, or at least the sales leaders in this case. We can look at who's ahead and who's not. Well, the Central here's ahead, but it's being pulled down by GB and Scan, right? Well, why? Well, this is where you go back to, again, those kind of three KPIs for us, right? The real drivers of this isn't the fact that the real drivers here that we probably want to hone in on this as part of the project, because the scope, the reality is we actually aligned with all those numbers, is the fact that we're seeing a much higher adoption in Central Europe than we are seeing in either of the other two regions, as well as a more aggressive price lift that was designed from the beginning and flowing through. This is, there's a couple things buried in this, right? So first of all, now we're doing peer group analysis. So why is Great Britain different than the Central? Like that, maybe there's something happening there. Maybe we believe it or we don't. The bottom line, though, is the fact that we're looking at this collectively on a regular cadence and driving action items out of it to try to get us back on track. Okay, that could be changing thresholds. That could be being more aggressive. Perhaps we replicate what we saw going on in Central and we try to use it in GB. That's all very legitimate sort of conversations that come out of this. And because it is driven, again, at a sponsor level, now we're really into that delivery of our results. We're able to actually push to make sure that we stay on track with where we thought we were going to be. So just to recap along the line here, this concept of planning, proper change management put within the organization, and then lastly, the the top level sponsorship to ensure that these things stick. These are the things that really drive an organization, to the right when I think in terms of, who's capturing the most value when we work with our clients day in and day out. And, I think my theme here on this one is that they are connected and they should be connected. And in fact, the power of them working together is the fact that it really is about delivering that plan, executing, and having clear KPIs in terms of, listen, is the organization behaving the way they're not? And if not, let's go back and root cause it. Time and time again. So with that, let me just do a little bit of a case study here, right? This is a client that was a large distributor with heavy counter sales, right? So that was kind of where the project was focused when it got to Vendavo. But let me give you a little more background on them here just a second. So first of all, how do we get to where we're at? The one thing that really started this is that the leadership at a top level recognized we needed to actually begin focusing on organic growth, not just acquisitions or that sort of thing, but how do we actually maximize the value capture within the existing portfolio, which led them towards heading down pricing as a key opportunity area for them to work with. Okay. This is a distributor, a lot of product counts, a lot of challenges in terms of managing prices and cost flow throughs, et cetera. But looking at some preliminary studies, there was a 50 basis point improvement that company was targeting to head towards, right? Saw the evidence, did the business case, good things going there from that standpoint. This happened to be an optimization customer of ours. So we ended up doing it was a competitive buy cycle, right? We obviously went through the whole sales process from Vendavo standpoint. But we designed a phase rollout with that client to actually roll it out to the organization, right? So it wasn't a big bang here. There was some phases related to it. The thing is, though, is that when we first rolled this out, some significant challenges existed. Now, there were successes as well, and those certainly showed up in the numbers, but let's just kind of talk about what we really saw happening once this was rolled out, right? There was certainly value captured. We were pushing numbers out into the field. They had a chance to see them, react, use them or not. And we certainly saw those sort of things come through over time. But the reality is that we did not, and I say we, the collective between the client as well as Vendavo, the organization was not really prepared for change at the end of the day. Moving to a different technology platform, or really a different pricing strategy is what this was, if I think about it. Regardless of where you were in the organization, there was things that they just weren't quite comfortable with, right? If I've been in this industry for 10 years and I'm the pricing administrator and suddenly I'm being told there's this box of widgets should be priced differently, there's probably a pretty good reason why Vendavo is recommending that. But, if I have a myopic view of well, that can't be right, mine must be right, I'm going to ignore this. Now you just eroded your impact. Similar source of erosion at the sales level, right? Just not comfortable with price changes. A lot of these had relationships with some of these customers for years and years and years. Weren't comfortable passing them on. And in this particular design, they had the ability to override what pulled up on the system to their heart's content. There was a back-end reporting process for overrides, but it had no teeth to it. And then lastly, the regional leaders were frankly unprepared for objections, right? They hadn't necessarily been briefed in terms of the full spectrum of things that could come up. Given the talking points, the escalation paths, right? And so the sort of medium to high level within the organization wasn't prepared for this. It resulted in a bit of a, hey, we got to fix this and that, then we'll be okay. That's a bit of a red herring, candidly, usually when this comes up. Not that there isn't things to improve. Nothing's ever perfect on the first go. We know that. And we got processes to help fix these sort of things over time and improve them. That's just good day-to-day management. But that wasn't really addressing the issue. The real reality was there was plenty of good stuff in there. We weren't necessarily executing on it. And so if I think back to the framework I introduced at the beginning of this call and what were those pillars for success, the reality was the technology was performing as designed, right? We'd gone through the whole process, the assumptions in terms of how is tuned, how is outputting. It was not unreasonable in terms of how it was set up and executing. But we failed internally with that client to really broadly communicate the impact of where we were trying to drive benefit, particularly on small clients here, right? So that plan, there might have been a concept, like, yeah, we'll do it here, but we hadn't really talked it through and really circulated, we're gonna do X, Y, and Z, and how's that gonna roll? Which create a lot of internal surprises and misalignments within the team, within the client's team at least. We did have training for this product, but we really missed the opportunity to educate and empower the broader organization here. Lastly, or second to last year, the performance management was not tied to vetted and agreed upon goals. And so even though we were going after a particular number from the business case standpoint, that had not been blown out to individual business leads. There wasn't really accountability related to it. And so there was no incentive to pull things back into, a course corrective sort of mode. And so even though there were successes, like certain regions here were early adopters, they kind of leapt ahead. They failed to replicate that. Successes failed to replicate because we hadn't done the work to do these 3 pillars. We hadn't really communicated. We hadn't done the proper change management, and we didn't have the necessary program oversight with teeth behind it to make sure that we're actually continuous to improve. Now, I will say, however, that's not a great story, right? And I realize I'm talking about one of my customers at the moment, or a case study here. And so, what do we do to improve this as a group, right? Well, so first of all, we had to go back and we had to look at, listen, there was a technology element to this. We limited some price changes, which alleviated most of the concerns, right? We kind of, we can debate the right number into that risk reward profile. We revisited it and we came up with a better plan, is the short answer here. Leadership got involved, started pushing the regions to adopt, right? And citing those early successes. Listen, if Bob can get it, why can't Susan, or vice versa, right? There's really was, really eliminating the excuses and setting the expectation and the tone within the organization. And then certainly, as a partner here, we collaborated closely with that client to help them understand, well, listen, how are individual regions doing? Are we seeing any sort of elasticity response that was relevant here? And ultimately got them into the point where their adoption rate started to pick up. The value case became extremely positive over time, and we got them back on the right track. That was about a 5x improvement in adoption and resulted in over $5 million in annual value capture. So the key lessons I learned from that I would just, would share with this one is you got to proactively address this, right? This isn't about whether or not it's necessary or not. It's about someone needs to be doing it. Someone has to be doing it, or we run into challenges. It doesn't matter to me at the end of the day whether that's my client who's taking on this onus, whether it's Vendavo, we offer additional services around here, or a third party, right? You may have a preferred SI or some other partner who's willing to take on these sort of topics. And all those are fine, but you have to do them, or things just don't go as well as you want them to be. Going thin on change management is appealing. I see this a lot with new customers who are thinking about heading down a journey, but there is distinctive erosion challenges that tend to come up with clients who go light on that change management. I think up to 2 years, because certainly you do a rollout, you got to course correct, and then time moves on, and suddenly it's year 2, and we've missed the opportunity to really do things right on the first go around. And for us, this is the commercial excellence platform that Mitch opened with at the beginning here. I mean, that is the engine that allows us all to be possible. But it's not just that. It's about the other topics here that really matter, that we want to be making sure that we're helping our clients with, because again, or at least be talking about. And at the end of the day, again, if a client wants to take it, or a third party, that's totally okay, but we need to be able to help with them as well. So I think, for me, I started this whole conversation with, listen, we want to talk about really the leaders from a value capture standpoint. And I'll take this opportunity to really pitch, I believe it's tomorrow's session, Mitch, where we're doing awards.
That's right.
The folks who are really good at this tend to be on the right-hand side of their value capture journey. And I want to see them, and I want to see all my clients be on that right-hand side from day one, right? that helps you accelerate that value capture, right? Yes, we have to tune this. Obviously, I'm talking very broad brush at this point in mind, right? But regardless of what industry someone belongs to, my goal is always to get them on the best path forward, as well as once they are going, similar to the case study I shared, how do I continue to move them to the right? And fundamentally, whether it's a fresh start or someplace where we're going back to, the fundamentals remain the same. You got to have those 3 pillars in place. Yes, the technology's got to be right for it. But within that is how clients similar to the one I shared, as well as the many other ones that are summarized in this aggregate number, drive benefits to the bottom line. They've got a plan, they put the change in place, and they execute against it. And like I said, at the end of the day here, I think this is just really a compliment to a lot of the great professionals that Vendavo works with day in and day out. It's a lot of hard work, not gonna sugarcoat it. But when it executes and comes together, it generates significant benefits to the bottom line.
Absolutely. Those are tremendously impressive numbers, Justin. The fact that these numbers are generated in light of what is going on today. This is in the midst of what a lot of people are looking around, shaking their heads, never imagined this type of disruption, that folks are being able to adjust their business models, get into the details, do the granularity that you're talking about, make those assignments, those enablements, and deliver this kind of value. It's tremendously impactful there. Thanks for that, Justin. Let's turn now to our Q&A. And again, folks, use that Q&A function there on the Zoom bar, the Zoom controls as you play with the Zoom options there. A couple of questions are coming in. Okay, Justin, here's the first one. What does it take to set up an in-depth discussion and analysis, quote unquote, as you refer to it in your results?
An in-depth analysis? Oh, on the summary slide?
Yeah.
So for us, there's always levels, right? And I'd say we can very quickly in less than a week or two generally get a pretty representative analysis to get to an opportunity level. Okay. Always require input from the client, right? So that's doing things in a vacuum to me is not particularly compelling because there's always something with an organization. Now I will say that with most clients, they often think that they're very unique at the end of the day. And there probably is something unique within them, but typically most people's problems look similar at the end of the day. I think that's kind of the benefits that Vendavo brings to this sort of engagement. But that first pass, not very long. The specifics of, some of those analytics that we talked about there as well, maybe, a day or two here and there in terms of, well, let's pull together a report. Let's have the KPIs in place. Usually the initial setup is, like I said, days or hours, but it's what you do with it that matters more to me than anything else.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's analysis is part of it, but also the ongoing. In fact, that's the next question here. Is this again? They're using the word analysis. Is this ongoing or a one-off measure? What happens if you do the analysis project?
Oh, so I think this is getting to how does Vendavo fit into this picture at the end of the day? And so for the most productive relationships I see is where it is a joint looking at the problem. And so we are currently, most of our customers, we do a quarterly refresh for our assessment in terms of how value is being captured. That's really where most of those numbers tally from. We are moving to more frequent with a lot of our clients, right? Monthly, even embedding some of our resources into project teams on a weekly or monthly basis. It just helps accelerate that value, helps lower, frankly, the overall risk of the project. And so when we think about, number of analytics and how often we're engaged with clients, it is a spectrum, right? If everything's going well, those are easy phone calls. If things are challenges, that's where you got to dig in. So I think it kind of runs the gamut there, Mitch. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely. One follow-up from me on that. You use spectrum, right? So I'm guessing on one end is the project, very project basis, where it may be really one-off. What does the other end look like? Is that just that's the monthly or even now quarterly or even now monthly kind of engagement where it's really I think you used the term embedded. There's somebody that's part of the business team, and it's less of a project and more of this is just how we do things.
Yeah. So that for Vendavo, I mean this is really this is the most common way that the value consulting organization is involved with our clients. Is we are, and I think it works best is when certainly we may be wearing different, carrying different flags. I've got the Vendavo flag, our client may have their particular corporate flag. But the reality is that when challenges come up, having someone to talk to who is one seen it before, right, has seen other clients who have gone through similar struggles, that sort of ongoing consultative relationship is a really big value add for clients who are trying to navigate the waters of their individual industries. Certainly 2020 hasn't been an easy one. And what that allows us to do is tie together, listen, let's talk about what do we need to do to achieve those results. And then we've got that resource there who begins to really understand the business, who knows when you're able to do a price change or not, and certainly the functional expert related to the novel solution to be able to help guide customers through, well, this is the best way to go do this, or have we thought about X, Y, and Z? That is, that level of business acumen and expertise is incredibly valuable to our clients. And I've definitely seen a lot of very, very exciting, frankly, perhaps analytics, but also, action items come out of these sort of relationships. I mean, these things can go in all sorts of different directions, whether it be, again, people, process, or technology. I think all three of them I've seen get covered.
It feels, I'm getting this mental image of these flags coming up, and you've got battalions with different capabilities being massed to go out and win in competitive landscape. Thanks for that, Justin. Appreciate that. Next question here. Okay, I'll paraphrase this a little bit, but it says, I lead a pricing function at a multi-billion, multi-region organization, but this effort feels like it's based on broader engagement than my typical pricing process interactions. What are the typical roles that ought to be involved and time requirements for those roles and their involvement? That's a long question. Can you?
It sounds like it's an organizational design question.
It feels like, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Who should be involved?
Who should be involved in structuring it? Is that
in the in your cycles? I think there was one slide that you kind of answered this already. You have one example in the case study where it was regular meetings with the CEO and the regional president. So that's part of the answer, right? Is there a broader set of folks, or kind of who sits at the table with you when you have these conversations?
Yeah. So I think the CEO is normally, frankly, a bit of an exception. I mean, they've got other things to do usually at this size of organization, but certainly at a BU level or some other level. I mean, that tends to be the when you get that accountability and sponsorship. I've seen a CMO run these meetings, right? So that's really the top of the relationship that you need there, that appropriate sponsor. I think there's an element of that question, or perhaps I misheard you, Mitch, but as it relates to organizational design, right? There is I've seen very, very lean, small pricing organizations are much broader. It really depends a bit on terms of the go-to-market for the company in terms of what that final pricing structure or pricing organization looks like, if that's where we're headed from. If we were designing it, it would be, you have to get into the, time studies, standard work, those sort of questions to really get it sized up. But I may be going on a rabbit hole in terms of that topic. When we think about who is involved, right? Let's just say we've got the structure in place. The most common meeting that we see there is, again, like I said, that general manager, the CMO, that sort of level, and then the appropriate owners that we've established are the accountable for delivering that number. Okay. So if that is, I don't know, let's go back to the European example. Normally you got a country level, sales leaders or et cetera in there who by definition, if we've gone through the appropriate planning process, they've been given a number to go deliver. It's part of their plan. So they need to be there as well. Usually we're not talking analyst level, right? That's too low level for these sort of things. This needs to be a business problem, talk about risk reward, right? It needs to be at that level of the organization.
Sure. Yeah. I like that term, business level. Whoever you talk to make business level discussions, whether it's contract, high level contract with particular customers or market strategies, it's largely that type of interaction, those roles that you would be dragging in.
I think honestly the self-assessment I challenge myself with would be, if almost more than anything else, that sort of cadence meeting where I got a number and I own a number and I'm going after the number, your sponsor's responsibility there is more than anything else signaling of importance. Right. And so, and unlike, and I think this is really where like a strategic pricing organization differs from like an administrative, pricing organization, which is, how do I view it? If I view it as critical to my business, and I firmly believe every organization should, just because the lever arm is so incredibly powerful, which by the way goes both ways. You do it badly, bad things happen. But because it's so important to you, I believe it should be at that level of the organization. And by having the regular meeting to talk about it specifically, we're setting the organizational tone that we will go improve in X, Y, and Z. After that, problems tend to sort themselves out because you got leaders, you got laggards. The leader will make the appropriate decisions when they start seeing how things flow through.
I like the phrase there that they convey the importance, and part of that is getting that elevated for folks, and then making sure that resources made available, barriers broken down. This is important. People hear that and they move forward with that because it's an owned thing, owned goal that business person has, and then the folks that report understand that and they're going to work to deliver that.
And again, I'll also go back to plugging for tomorrow, Mitch. I mean, the awards we're giving up tomorrow, when I think about those organizations, I mean, and I know you'll do more of a detailed Q&A from them. I'd frankly encourage people to go listen to that one because, those are the organizations that really have stood out. We got great customers all over the place. So you have to boil it down to like a handful. I'm really excited to have those folks on board at that presentation. I think it'd be a great chance for others to kind of hear, not from Vendavo, although I don't mind talking, but from some of the individuals, some of the dots on the chart that we're talking about, and what really made them successful. They could put it in their own words.
Absolutely, those are going to be some great stories tomorrow. All right, that I think will cover off our questions, Justin. If you'll go to the next slide, I do want to share with folks, we've been talking a lot today about commercial excellence and maturity. We have a very simple survey that helps you start framing your current situation. You can grab a screenshot to get that URL or just scan that QR code. It's a 10-minute assessment. It helps you walk through different capabilities, simple questions, and then offers up some suggestions of what you might want to do depending on how you score on that. And of course, we'd be happy to talk to you about that further. Justin and his team use that quite a bit as they walk out and talk to folks. Justin, thanks so much. Really appreciate your time today. All the work on this, some great information for folks. Appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me.
Bet. And thanks to everyone that joined via the webcast. So until we speak again, this is Mitch Lee, your profit evangelist, saying have a profitable day.